So, a lot of you here, most of you are here to have the food that Jules arranged. We know that. We know that. So, but also to hear from our city attorney. He, as many of you know, was our councilman starting in 1994, 95, and then he became our assembly member in Sacramento, and now he's our city attorney. So I guess the first question on the floor is, what after city attorney? I guess we're not supposed to ask. There'll be more, okay. President.
That's a good idea. All right.
So, with that background, I'd like to introduce our city attorney, Mike Feuerer, who, as was referred to earlier, has agreed to stay around after, as long as it takes. Mike Feuerer.
Thanks, Richard. It is so nice to be here with you. You know, our friends in the news media wanted me to go outside and do a couple of interviews, and that interrupted the best part of the evening for me, which was going around and saying hello to each of you. We go back almost 25 years. It has been just a privilege to continue to represent you. And I want to dive in to maybe 6 or 7 minutes of things besides airport noise, airplane noise. And then I think, given what you care about the most, devote the rest of my presentation and your questions to airport issues, if you like. So, because I saw Christine speak, and I want to be on the right side of Christine at every moment if possible. So, yeah, all right. So first, I want to ask my friend Tamar Galatson to come forward for a second, please. So Tamar, many of you know, has been your neighborhood prosecutor for how many years?
Almost 17.
Almost 17 years. And I have to say, you know, I became city attorney almost 6 years ago. Tamar's work was legendary before I became city attorney. And I know how beloved she is in this community because she's earned your respect. When I ran to be city attorney, I said that I would at least double our neighborhood prosecutor program. I wasn't sure where the money would come from, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I can tell you we've essentially tripled the program now, and we're still trying to have it grow further. For that reason, we need to have a second in command to oversee the neighborhood prosecutors throughout Los Angeles. That is Tamar. We just named her to be the number 2 person for all neighborhood prosecutors, and that means that she will not be your individual neighborhood prosecutor starting shortly. We have a new terrific prosecutor named Andrew, who you'll meet, who's a great guy. You're going to enjoy him very much. But I want to say tonight, when I mentioned Tamar, some of you who know her well applauded. I'm going to ask you, could everybody join me in giving Tamar an ovation for 17 years of remarkable service? You got a standing ovation from people who have no place to sit. So that's pretty good. All right, so do you want to say a word, Tamar?
Yeah.
Just a word.
I just want to say thank you. I think on the way here I was thinking that in almost 17 years I think I've missed 4 meetings. So I think that deserves some sort of award. I think I was delivering a baby during one of them, so I think that should count. So I just want to say thank you. I've worked on some amazing projects with some really inspirational individuals, and I hope I made a difference in your community, and I look forward to doing a lot of the work that I did here in Sherman Oaks and helping the neighborhood prosecutors across the whole city. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have been giving us some little tidbits of useless information at every meeting lately, as far as the quirkiest case that you've seen. Can you do one just because Mike's here and I'm sure he wants to hear it? A recent one.
I'm going to circle back after I get inspired by something he talks about, so let me think about that.
Okay, fair enough. All right, but you know, in all seriousness, the reason I'm so focused on the program that Tamar is leading is I have a very strong view about what makes LA strong, and that's our neighborhoods. And I don't want our city attorneys to be relegated to being downtown. We should be in communities, working with homeowners groups and neighborhood councils and schools and the business community, hearing what you care about the most and solving your problems, whether it's through traditional prosecution or something more creative than that. And that's what Tamar personifies. So I wanted to give her the credit that she deserves. Now, a couple of other issues, because Richard advertised them in the flyer, and he'll be annoyed with me if I don't at least refer to these for about 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll go to airplanes. So one issue that Richard raised is really important for all of us, and that's how we combat hate. I think for most of us, the spectacle of seeing the horrific tragedy in New Zealand, following the tragedy in Pittsburgh, following the horrible events in Charlottesville, I could go on, right? We live in such a divisive time. I've represented you one way or the other, on and off, for almost 25 years. This is a community that values solidarity, coming together, and looks to each other as a source of strength. So in addition to prosecuting hate crimes, which my office does, I've been trying to find other ways to express the kind of unity that Los Angeles needs to stand for. I just held a meeting, the second in the past month and a half, of clergy leaders yesterday, of every faith you can imagine, to concretize projects that can exemplify what the best of Los Angeles means, what the strongest values we share are. I was talking to a member of the media earlier who was asking me, well, in addition to prosecuting, you want to prevent, and the answer is, you bet. I will tell you, however, a sobering story as I move on to the next issue. I just wanted to spot this for you, something we care about, because you'll be seeing my office in conjunction with clergy leaders and others rolling out projects that affect you and will improve our quality of life on this issue. About a month ago, about 5 weeks ago, there was a week that went like this. On Monday, Turkish flags were posted in an Armenian school a little bit west of here. Remember that?
Yeah.
I was speaking to kids today, students at a school, asking them why would that matter to Armenian Americans? Unfortunately, a little girl stood up and said, because the Turks committed a genocide at the beginning of the 20th century that they still refuse to acknowledge. That's why it's so hurtful when those flags are posted. I went to the school. The next day, there was a nationally publicized event that was alleged to be a hate event targeting an African American. The next day, a Tarzana synagogue was defaced. And the next day, a report came out saying that hate crimes are up 10%. So I do now a weekly TV address on the city's channel. And I chose the topic of how to abate the divisiveness and bring us together. What was extraordinary, and I want you to think about the meaning of this for a second, is, you know what Nextdoor is? The app, right? So we posted this on Nextdoor, a message of unity, of how we can look to each other as a source of strength. And it elicited so much divisive, hateful response that Nextdoor said, please take down your message of unity. It's sparking too much discord. Think about that for a second. We are better than that. And this is me speaking not just as your city attorney, but as a leader in the city. I am committed to living in a city where instead of having that reaction, the strongest voices are the resonant ones that require us to come together. I was at the Islamic Center last Friday in the wake of the tragedy in New Zealand. And I can tell you, hundreds of worshipers to whom I spoke are hungering for all of us to come together, not divide us from each other. I wanted to mention that. I will just briefly mention a couple other things, and then we'll talk about the noise. So, when I was here a year ago, I challenged this community. I said to you, all of us need to be working together to grapple with the issue of homelessness that disgraces all of us. And I challenged you, who is going to be a champion for trying to find a constructive way to say yes in an appropriate place? And I'm so proud of the fact that many members of this homeowners association reached out to other leaders in Sherman Oaks in an effort to try to find that place. And I know it's been a challenge. We haven't found the right place yet, but the point is you are trying. You are trying to lead in that constructive way. Because I'm going to tell you a quick story from my personal life that encapsulates what we all must confront. I live in a neighborhood in the Fairfax area. On my block, where the houses cost what the houses cost here, there is a corner with a ledge on it. I noticed in the late summer, early fall, that a woman began to find that ledge a place to be as the sun was going down. She would eat a little bit of food, she'd read for a moment, and then she'd put a blanket, a soiled old blanket, over her head. And I assumed that she slept sitting up with that blanket over her head. The blanket, I gathered, was to shield her from the indignities of the world around her, so that she couldn't see out, and so that no one would see her. I did, for a while, what almost everybody here, I bet, did at some point in your life. I walked by. But I decided not to do that anymore. And I'm still not quite sure why. You know, many of you here knew my father. He walked precincts back in 1994 here. My father passed away 3 years ago. And when I was a kid in San Bernardino growing up, as a little kid, we would see somebody down in their luck on the street, and sometimes little kids make fun of people that they shouldn't. And my dad used to say to me in ways I never forget, you know, that person was at one point a little child and the apple of their parents' eye. This is a human being who matters even now. And I decided, I think I heard that voice, and I said, I'm going to not walk by anymore, even as a public official. And I began to engage her, and I'm going to encapsulate a series of conversations into a very brief anecdote. I asked her about her background. Her name is Anne. Anne said, I was born in Nigeria. I was trained as a lawyer. I went to work in Texas, and I practiced tax law. I had a relationship there, and something very bad happened. I didn't ask her what happened, and she fled Texas to avoid this abusive relationship. One terrible thing happened after another. She said, and I found myself here, like this. And she said to me, no, it's not as bad as you think it is. A couple more meetings, we built some trust. I said, let me help you. She said, I gotta tell you, if that means going to Skid Row as a single woman, I'm not doing it. It's too dangerous for me. I said, what if we could find some other place for you? And she, we talked a few times, she said, well, who are you? And I gave her my business card. And because she was trained as a lawyer, she kind of went, oh my gosh. And I said, well, let's just see. If I could find something for you, can we help? And she said yes. So, but it's not easy, you know. If I make an appointment with Tony Landler, for example, you know, I know you, I have a phone number, I walk precincts, I remember where you live, right? All right, but for Anne, she had no phone and no address, so making an appointment for somebody, not easy. But we agreed there'd be a parking lot, I told her where to go, I got a caseworker to come out, I told him what she looked like, and I was there that evening. And she said, you know, it was great. He was treated with such dignity. I think for the first time she felt some respect and some hope. And the next day I came back in the evening, and she was clapping. She said, you know what? He said I have a place to live. I never saw her again. 5 weeks later, in the fall, I got an email. Remember, I gave her my business card. The subject line said, reactivation. The content? She wanted me to know that she had reactivated her membership in the Texas bar. She wanted me to know that she wanted to take the California bar. And she asked my advice on starting her own law firm. Now this is a woman, understand, who was sitting on a corner with a blanket over her head, sleeping, sitting up. But this is not easy. I spoke at a church in South Los Angeles. I described Anne's situation about a month ago. And a very generous lawyer came up to me and gave me her card and said, I want to be a mentor to Anne. I sent Anne an email, then another one. I haven't heard back. This is not easy stuff. But I tell you the Anne story because if you walked by Anne as I walked by Anne, you would have said, I'm not sure anything to do with her. And here was a person who matters. So thank you for the effort. Let's not stop the effort. Now, last thing. I was talking, I'm not going to name a name, but to one of your members a moment ago, and I want to conclude before the noise with this. Remember the Parkland incident last year? I was in Washington just a few days before the March for Our Lives. Remember the March for Our Lives? That was the Parkland kids trying to galvanize a nation. I was there because I think you might remember that when I became city attorney, I reached out to the Manhattan DA and we convened the first ever coalition of prosecutors across the country to try to combat gun violence. It's a nonpartisan group and it's extraordinary. From nothing, we have dozens of the leading prosecutors in the country working together on this issue. So we are in Washington because the leaders of the House and the Senate wouldn't even convene a hearing on a bipartisan bill to combat gun violence a month after Parkland. So we stood with key senators, Congress members, we stood with the Parkland kids, uniformed police chiefs and prosecutors, sending the message, we're all in this. Forget partisanship, look at that tableau, we're in this together. I want to tell you about one of the Parkland students. Her name is Alea Eastman. Here is Alea's story. And I tell you, her mother was there with tears streaming down her cheeks. Alea was 16 in her Holocaust Studies class when the bullets started to fly at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School. Then Nicholas, just across the aisle from her, fell to the ground. So Alea, not knowing what to do, decided she'd fall to the ground too because that might save her. So she did so, but the bullets kept flying. So Alea, this is when her mother really gets emotional. Alea pulled Nicholas's dead body, 16-year-old girl, over hers so she'd protect herself from the gunfire and save her own life. After Parkland and after convening on Capitol Hill, I convened a blue ribbon panel on school safety here. Many of you know my kids went to Portola and then to North Hollywood High School. I'm a big believer in our schools and in keeping them safe. Now you should know that LAUSD is often looked to as a model for other school districts for safety. But you should also know that I prosecute adults when their kids bring guns that were not safely stored to school. We just got a conviction in a situation at Grant High School, not far from here when that happened. This happens too much. Other issues at schools. I know from being a dad at schools, there is violence at our schools too, and we can do better. This panel was remarkable. Former Supreme Court Justice, leading law enforcement, teachers, parents, kids, one of the leading mental health experts in the United States who's a consultant to Parkland and others. 18 people. We convened for 5 months, had hearings in every part of Los Angeles. I know some of you came to those hearings. We produced a report with 33 recommendations in it. They are practical, they are important, and the school district and I have embarked on some of them, but most of them have yet to be implemented. And I have a mission for you on this. Whether your kids or grandkids are in public or private school or out of school altogether, all of us, whether we are LAUSD district officials or just members of our community, have a stake in safety in our schools. So, I would urge you to contact your school board member and say that's what you think. Because I do not think that these recommendations, some of which have yet to be implemented, should sit until the next tragedy. And everybody says, oh my gosh, we have these before us. And I tell you, they matter because the official I mentioned, who's a consultant to the Parkland School District, just told a big group in the Valley, I was here at Valley of Shalom with a panel with her, that Parkland is looking at our recommendations. All right, so I urge you to join me in this mission of school safety. Now, let's talk, by the way, anybody here, without making you too conspicuous, anybody want to say that that's your cause too? Anybody agree with them? All right. So Rob Wilcox is here. Rob's in the back of the room. If you want to get materials from my office, he'll give you addresses and emails and phone numbers. Make a few calls because I'm not letting go of this. Now, let's talk about airplanes. So I want to talk about two different airports for a second. And as you know, I don't use notes when I talk to you at all. But tonight I'm going to use a few notes because I want to be sure that I get this right, because it's very complicated from a lawyer standpoint. I've been talking to you as a public official and a lawyer. Now I'm going to go all lawyer on you for a second, okay? So, Van Nuys Airport, as was mentioned, as I think Christine mentioned, at Van Nuys Airport, there is a thing called a Section 175 letter. That means basically the LA World Airports agreed to send a letter to the FAA asking for one of a couple things, either dispersal of flights from and in and to the Van Nuys Airport, or restoring a previous turn point over the Sepulveda Basin. Either one, it was said, might alleviate some noise emanating from the Van Nuys Airport. So the World Airports folks sent that letter. They sent it earlier this month to the FAA. I checked this morning, there's no response yet. That is not a surprise. This 175 letter, I don't want to get all bureaucratic about this. This is a new procedure. So there's actually no specific deadline by which the FAA has to respond. So we're going to check in with our World Airports folks, and I'll keep you apprised of what happens with regard to their response to that request. So that's Van Nuys to our west. Now let's talk about Burbank to our east. I've gotten letters and phone calls and emails from many of you. Many of you from Sherman Oaks. There are members here from the Studio City Homeowners Group who are raising their hands very politely. You're standing and not sitting down mostly, but I appreciate that. I'm very glad you're here too. Because I haven't had a chance. You know, we've corresponded by email and stuff. I've responded to hundreds of emails, but I haven't had a chance to publicly discuss it. This is a good opportunity. So I want to talk about what we can do regarding the Burbank Airport noise issues. And there are sort of two categories to address here, right? One category is the potential expansion of the terminal. I'm going to defer that for a second. I'm not sure what that noise is, but I'm doing my best. The other category has to do with the actual flight patterns, right? Let's talk about that first. So I think many of you, most of you I think are aware that my office, we've sent lots of different correspondence to the FAA. We've sent Freedom of Information Act requests. We've sent comments about the environmental process and so on. Why have we done that first? Because I'll tell you this as a lawyer, these are predicates to any potential legal action later on. We got to get information first. And we're seeking information now. Now, in the event that, well, before I go on, let me say, there are two kinds of lawsuits that cities could bring with regard to the airport issues. One is a lawsuit under the Freedom of Information Act. If we don't get any response from the FAA, we could choose to pursue it that way. The other is an environmental challenge. But the environmental challenge is different from the kind of lawsuit that most of you and I would like to see possibly bring, and that is, we cannot, as a city, challenge the flight paths, per se. And you know, Bob is shaking his head, yes, we know well from our previous helicopter work together and so on, we don't have that authority. So our challenges would be with regard to the environmental work that was done or not done regarding the flight patterns. And so we've sent this correspondence, we've weighed in, we're seeking information, and we have the option of litigating over those issues later on. Depends what information we get or don't get back. Now, as far as the terminal expansion is concerned, there is yet to be an environmental analysis of the expansion. And what we would do is weigh in with comments, and then subsequently there could be litigation about the airport expansion. But again, it's about whether the environmental analysis was done right. So in either case, the result of any litigation would be do a better environmental analysis. So what does that mean to you? It doesn't sound very satisfying to many of you, and I get that, given the limitations. But I do want to say, sometimes in litigation, unusual things happen, so you could be in an environmental lawsuit, and maybe that leads people to rethink what they're doing, or to negotiate something. We're not quite there yet, but that's the lay of the land. So now, you know, I say to my staff all the time, that's nice, all that legal background is terrific, we can end there, but no matter what community I'm speaking to, my charge to my staff is, if we lived in the neighborhood, what would we want to know? So one question that we want to know is, why does it seem like it's gotten noisier, right? Because we're all kind of puzzling over that. Let me refine the question. And Christine kind of alluded to this. If the environmental analyses haven't been done yet, if the terminal hasn't expanded yet, then what is it that has changed to make it seem noisier? And that's a key question. We've asked the FAA. I don't have a response yet from the FAA to that. There was a study done, and the study wasn't clear to what to attribute the additional noise. Not sure. So where does that leave us? Well, for one thing, that's why we requested the documents that are in our Freedom of Information Act request. And to give you a sense of some of the things we asked for, not to get too technical, but you should know what we asked for. We want the data that is for the FAA's noise analysis. We want to know, for example, Christine lives in Stone Canyon area, right? So that's at a higher elevation. Well, did their noise analysis take into account that the terrain is at different levels in this area, right? Richard lives up there, other of you live up there. If you're higher up, the planes could be noisier relative to where you are than if you're in the flats. So we want to know more about that. We've asked for the records that they've used for their safety risk management, and we're waiting for those records. So where does that leave us tonight? It's too noisy. I get it. I've spoken at maybe, 20 of these meetings. This is the most crowded this room has ever been. I get it. And it's crowded for this reason and this reason alone. It's too noisy. No, I know that. We have taken, again, all the steps we can take up to now. We're waiting for more information. If I lived here, that would not be adequate because it hasn't stopped the noise from happening. But one thing you know from me for many years is I will never make a promise I can't keep. And right now, we're at this stage of the process with more stages yet to come. I cannot predict with certainty exactly what will happen next because I don't know if the FAA is going to blow us off or whether they're going to give us information yet. I'm going to find out more. But we are on it. We have hired a key consultant to work with us who is an expert on these issues. One of my staff members is assigned to work on these issues. You can imagine, we don't do airport stuff generally like this, but we have this outside person working with an inside person, and I am myself with thousands of cases and literally 1,000 staff members in 30 offices around town. As you can tell, I'm engaged on this issue too. That's where we are. Right? So now, I think it's best, Matt, if I don't talk, but rather listen a little bit. What are the questions people... Let's prioritize the flight questions first. I can do the CBS thing, you want that?
Okay, is John and Jill still here?
Yeah.
Where are you guys? Just raise yours. I know your wife just had knee surgery or hip surgery, so they're over there. These two guys called me a couple days ago, or sent me an email, as I've gotten a bunch of emails recently on about being pissed off about the airport noise, or the airplane noise, and thinking about selling their homes. And this is a common thread. Other realtors are here. If the city, if this does increase the little amount of money that part of the reason that I don't know if they come to clean with you, but part of the reason that they're flying so low is to save a little bit of fuel consumption. Okay, that's what some of these uproars and some of these other groups have found out. They're saving a little bit of money on fuel, or the airlines are, and they're coming over our home. Years ago, the city or the community fought Van Nuys and Burbank to take off quickly, and they used to take off like this. Right. Now they're taking up these slow climbs. So again, if they're going to save a little bit of money, it's going to cost the city millions and millions and millions of dollars as far as real estate values going down. So that's, I don't know if you can put that into your lawsuit or not, but that's something that they have to consider. And also, like, the flight patterns that they're doing now over Burbank, over the lower Studio City areas, you've got major entertainment industries over there. Those sound studios, we need those types of jobs here. If they're not filming over at CBS Radford, a lot of these folks here have businesses that are affected by that.
Can I respond?
Of course.
Okay, that was Matt pandering to the CBS thing, which is sitting right here. Because Matt's looking for a third career. So what I wanted to say though is this. So again, we're at the stage of we have to see what they give us, and then we'll decide what action makes sense. But I don't want to discuss our legal strategies in a public forum, but I just want to say one thing, and that is I'm aware of the argument that perhaps property values will diminish. I'm aware also, and I can't give you legal advice, I'm not allowed to give you private legal advice, but I know that some of you are consulting with a private lawyer. And individual homeowners have different interests and different rights than the city does as a city. And so those of you who are having those conversations, I don't know where they're going to lead, but those may be conversations that complement anything else that happens. Just saying that.
Okay.
But I appreciate the spirit of the question.
So when you do file, if you do file a lawsuit representing the city of Los Angeles, will you be working with the private lawyers that are hopefully going to be hired?
It depends. Again, I don't want, again, I will not say I'm doing something and then not do it. I want to know what happens first, the information we're getting. But if we were to litigate this case, we are going to, of necessity, have to have some outside lawyer working with us because we're in territory that is very rarely invoked and not typical city attorney work. Your question is, would anybody we work with a private lawyer? It depends on the situation, it's possible. But again, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves too much because I don't want to falsely raise expectations. I want to make clear to you that we are very much on this. We understand the issues, we're knee deep into it. You'll know when we take action because I'll be very clear about that.
Okay. So I'm going to call some of these names. If you guys could just raise your hand so he can address you and not me. I think the name is Chris Terry on the airport. Susan Ashley. Raise your hand so he can see you. Heidi McKay. Vicki Herman, Merrill Ross, Heidi Abra, Michelle Florman, John Van, can't read your last name, Matthew Yeldon, Jeff Rode, and David, I think Kuykendall, and then Matt LeBate, and then Beth Lasky. So all these folks wrote questions.
Give me the question.
Absolutely. So all these folks wrote questions. And again, there's different issues, and I know you're going to respond to them because he does. However, the underline about most of those folks is your willingness, and I think you answered this. I know you did, but you know that I think they want to hear it again because they asked the question: are you willing to file a lawsuit on behalf of the community?
The answer is it's possible. Again, I don't know yet. It depends what we get back from the FAA and the analysis of that information. So at this point, again, we're moving as fast as we can given the information we're getting. I asked Matt to give me the bundle of questions because in addition to these questionnaires, I want to add you all to our database so we can keep you apprised of what's going on. Because one of the worst things is to hear the noise and have no idea if anybody cares, right? What I'm trying to convey to you is a very deep amount of caring, but no decision yet on exactly what move we're going to take.
Okay, thank you. Then also Stacy, and I can't read your writing, Stacy and then / John something?
McNamara.
Yes, okay.
I'm here for you.
Thank you. You have better eyes than I do. So she's a parent of a LAUSD student, and she goes through the different things about the airplanes. But she highlighted one thing, which is she calls it fun facts. I don't think it's fun, but I think it's important enough for you or everybody to hear. Her kids go to Carpenter, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So over Carpenter, 1,245 planes flew under 3,000 feet over Carpenter and other schools in January of 2019 alone. Between the school hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m., that's 5 planes per hour.
Matt, let me ask you a question. Whose question is this or comment?
She's in the back.
So can you tell Rob, who's back there, the tallest guy in the room, where you got that information so I know your information, please? Got it. Do me a favor, hook up with Rob and send that information to me. As you can tell, I'm collecting information now so I can decide what's best to do, okay? Let Rob know and we'll follow up. Thank you.
Okay. So, and this is one of the as we know, Carpenter School is one of the...
Premier schools in Los Angeles.
Exactly. Premier schools in Los Angeles, he said without a microphone.
That's true. Yeah.
Okay, Peter Basinski, you're in the back? Okay. So I think you've got some wrong information, but I'm going to clarify this, but I'm going to dovetail this into a different type of a question. Since all the flights from Burbank fly over Los Angeles and part of the airport is on Los Angeles property, which I don't believe it is. Okay, it's not.
A little tiny bit.
A little tiny bit is?
But yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. Okay. So, but my question that I was going to dovetail, well, your question was, does the city of Los Angeles have any influence over the Burbank expansion?
Yeah, so again, the stage at which we are, thank you. The short answer is the stage at which we are now is the environmental study stage. In terms of directing what happens at the terminal, I am not aware of any influence we have as a property holder there. I'll check it to be sure that that's true, because I want to check every avenue out. To the best of my knowledge, as I'm standing here now, the avenue for the city as far as expansion is concerned is to weigh in the environmental process as opposed to have a decision-making role in the process, but I'll check it out.
Okay, and again, just a little bit of information that I'm sure you guys all know, but the cities of Burbank, Glendale, and Pasadena own the airport. They get all the revenues, the profits from the airport. Guess how many flights fly over Burbank, Pasadena, or Glendale?
0.
Oh, okay. You knew the answer to that one. All right. So a couple other questions on the airport, then we're going to go to the rest of the stuff. Okay. So Vicki Herman just wants to know if you've stood at any of these homes yourself and experienced the onslaught of airplanes going over.
Yeah, I have not stood at someone else's home for that purpose. I have been at homes and I've heard the noise. And I will tell you, my chief of staff was just describing to me this morning at 4:30, when she was awake and starting to work, by the way, that suddenly she's saying, what's this airplane doing at this hour? Which, by the way, puzzles me because I wasn't sure anything was coming in at that hour. So, I'm very well aware of the issues. And by the way, I do want to encourage you, many of you have sent me emails, and therefore we respond to you. Others of you haven't. It's a good thing to send emails. Let me know.
We don't do shout-outs from the audience if you have questions.
No, I'm not shouting out, I wrote the question.
Okay.
I'm just saying, Daniel right here came to my
Yeah,
house.
okay.
There are legislators that are sending people to the homes when we request, and we really appreciate what you did. So
Okay.
if you can send people to homes, it's really important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got one.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Sir, we're trying to have a meeting. Thank you for bringing this out. I will get to it. I totally lost track of where we were going. Okay, so we're gonna move on, and Mike's gonna be here afterwards to answer your questions. So, just for a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you have a life?
No. But you knew that before you asked the question.
Okay, so we have 3 questions regarding homelessness, and you did cover some of the issues. Simi Noble Collins.
It's Simi, like Simi.
I'm sorry.
Simi.
Folks that are leaving, that are here for the airport, or that were here for the airport, if you can keep your conversations outside, just so we can finish the meeting.
And let me just say, as you're leaving, if you want to leave a piece of paper, maybe someone can leave a paper there and put your contact information on it so we can keep you in the loop, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. So Simi.
Correct?
Okay. She's talking about the homelessness and some of the shelters and such, but she comes up with a solution, which I think is interesting and good. I don't know if he'll think it's interesting and good, but she's talking about I think it's called a Camstuga hut.
No, it's like the Conestoga.
Conestoga hut. It's $25,000, cheaper than
No,
$2,500. I'm sorry. It's cheaper than, no shout outs please. But I appreciate you correcting me on that one. That's a big correction. It's cheaper than a tiny house, and is the city considering anything like that?
So the city actually, and I'm not an expert on this, did a design competition seeking solutions like this. And there was, I think, the School of Architecture and some students got involved. And there were some innovative ideas like that. One still has to find locations on which to put such shelters, right? But we didn't really talk much about homelessness except in general terms tonight, because I know that FAA was a big issue. But I have to say, I really appreciate the idea, and even though I am not in charge of the budget or homelessness, I have programs we haven't even discussed tonight that are really innovative to grapple with the issue. Keep the ideas coming, okay? Thank you, Cindy.
So Susan Collins, Susan, where are you?
She's in the center.
In the back. Way in the back, see? Okay. So since the homeless are now a protected class and have several groups that advocate for them, who advocates for the rest of us, the taxpayers? Wasn't the Mitchell case a good opportunity to reinstate the taxpayer's right to enjoy the sidewalks and parks again?
So Susan, you asked two questions. First, with regard to the general question of balance, that's exactly right. No, there needs to be a balance. Because this is not an issue of rich versus poor. I was in the Westlake neighborhood near downtown at a town hall meeting like this, and a young woman speaking exclusively in Spanish to me was clutching her young daughter's hand, and this is a low-income neighborhood, saying to me that she can't walk to her neighborhood grocery store with her daughter without being concerned for safety because of some issues, right? It's everybody's issue. And this is an issue where everybody is a little bit right? If you are a person, if you have a school nearby you, for example, and your kids have to run a gauntlet past a bunch of folks, it may be problematic. Here's what I think. Yes, there is balance that has to be struck. Yes, enforcement and so forth have a place. Yes, prevention has a place. Being homeless is not a crime, but being homeless does not inoculate you to being prosecuted if you're engaged in prostitution or drug use, that kind of thing, either. So we're trying very hard to strike that balance. In my office, we do all those things. As for the Mitchell case, which is, I don't want to take a long time on this, boy, has the press been misleading about that, and I am in a complicated place because legal ethics preclude me. The thing is now still being discussed. I'm not allowed to talk about the terms of this, which makes it a really hard conversation for me. But I can say this. So I read an editorial in the Daily News that said that we should be fighting this case. An incredibly ill-informed editorial. The person who wrote didn't know what they were talking about. And so I can just tell you, we fight cases all the time. We win in trial all the time. It is true in general terms in this case that I think that settlement of this is a superior option. In a couple of weeks, when I hope I can speak publicly about it, it'll be very clear why that's true. And I'm telling you this as somebody, just really quickly for everybody else in the audience. When I became city attorney, there was an injunction, a court order in place already in a case called Levon against the city. But the same issues as Mitchell. It was about, do people on the street, what happens to their stuff? It was alleged in the Mitchell case that LA officials, sanitation police, picked up people's precious items and threw them out. And the trial court and the Ninth Circuit, the Court of Appeal, ruled that this injunction can stay in place. And the injunction said that unless city officials have an objectively reasonable belief that the possession has been abandoned, you can't take it unless there is a health or safety issue. So Susan, after that happened, I won my office as city attorney. I myself went to federal court to mediate that case, and the order went away. But I also went to Skid Row. And I asked the city for their top health person. And we walked person to person on Skid Row in a very undignified way, he in a hazmat suit, me looking like this, saying, I wanted to know, is this a health hazard? Is this a hazard? Because I wanted to know what our people on the street were confronting when they're asked the same questions given the court order. I mention this to you because the Mitchell injunction is almost exactly the same. You can imagine how frustrated I was, having spent months getting rid of the one injunction, to have allegations emerge soon thereafter that are about the same, that the city threw out stuff and it wasn't fair to do that. I'm deeply involved in this. I think that opinion piece was dead wrong. I also think that everybody here has rights that need to be respected, and you can be sure in our office I spend a lot of time doing that, and yet, I say to my staff, we have innovative programs that are helping thousands of people. It's not a city attorney job, we're doing it anyway. I say to my staff all the time, we're helping maybe 3,000 people this year. It's not 30,000 people. And that's the challenge. 3,000 people is not enough people to help. We're struggling with all this. I talk to the police chief about these issues all the time. Sorry for the long answer, but I care about this a great deal, and hopefully in 2 weeks or so, or maybe 3, I can talk in detail, as opposed to now, where if I discuss the settlement terms, I would be breaching the ethics of being a lawyer.
So if I don't get to all your questions, it's not because
The
I don't
answers
think
are too long, I know.
it's not because I don't think it's the best questions. It's because the answers are too
All right,
long.
let's ask a good question. Okay, go ahead.
But he answers. Your answers are just
Oh, shut up. Just do it. Yeah.
okay. John Eisen.
Yeah. Where's John? Hi, John. All right.
All right. So there are 3 retail pot stores within a couple block area between Hazeltine and Costello on Ventura Boulevard. What are you able to do about the overconcentration of pot businesses in the same proximity of each other?
So I don't have my notes in front of me, but I think in the last 11 or 12 months, we prosecuted, I think, at 9 different locations. We've closed a couple locations. We closed a couple more, then they reopened, so we're prosecuting them again. And the bottom line is that I have staff devoted I have members of my staff now whose only job is to prosecute unlawful marijuana dispensaries. So we're in the middle of it right now. I have a new person assigned to do this, who I brought in to lead the effort, and we're on it. So if you have specific locations, by the way, just let my office know, and we'll check it out. Just, John, just so you know, the first step, LAPD has to go to the site, and because we don't just prosecute in the ether, we have to get a referral from the police department. They get there, assuming they confirm the allegations, then they refer the case to us, and then we go from there. Okay?
Okay. We're gonna,
That was quick.
that was, but we're gonna have a lightning rod right out
Let's
here.
do it.
There's gonna be a couple. David Kimball in the back. Okay. And he's got a similar enforcement, completely different but similar enforcement. Why aren't you enforcing? He wants to know why there's no enforcement on California vehicles that are super loud, like say, the Harleys and the souped up cars.
I think you stumped me.
Okay.
It's more of an LAPD question, and I'm not sure what the answer is.
Okay, and then Clarissa, right there. She wants to know why you personally. No, I'm just kidding. Why isn't there enforcement on gas-powered leaf blowers ordinance that was implemented in 1998?
So we have a program in our office, a couple years old now, called the ACE program. It's an administrative citation program. I know you don't like it, but I will just tell you, we actually have gone through a lot of administrative enforcement on this issue. So, and it is a ticket as opposed to a court trial, and it's designed to be more efficient that way. But that's how these matters are handled now, is through the ACE program. Now, if
This is the lightning rod.
Oh, sorry. Okay, we can talk more after.
The lightning round. Okay.
Hurry up.
How much time do I have, Richard?
You have a minute. Go.
3 minutes.
3 more questions.
Yeah, a minute each. Go.
Lisa Gifford, right over there.
Hi.
Will you be running for mayor?
Would you like me to?
Yes.
When the time comes, we'll talk.
Okay. I lost my count. Okay, I'm not going to be able to get to all this. So last April, Councilman David Roos sent you a letter to rein in the map apps, Waze, Google Farms, and such like that in some of the residential streets in Sherman Oaks. What is going on with that?
Okay, so I actually sat down myself with the Waze people. We looked at the issue. There's no lawsuit that could be brought. They're using publicly available data regarding publicly available streets. So that is a dead end at the moment. And I don't have a lot to say about Waze, except that I know that it's irritating affected people whose streets used to be quiet, and now people use them as cut-through streets. But a lawsuit is not the way to handle that. I'm not sure what the right answer is. I know it's not satisfactory.
Okay.
Last question.
Last question. Well, this is from Alan Shear, and it's not a question. It's school safety. LAUSD needs to take some positive action, follow through with safety report that Mr. Mike Feuerer wrote.
Yes. Thank you. Very much agree.
So the rest of you folks who I didn't get to the questions, thank you for your emails. Thank you for your phone or for your information. Mike will get back to you.
Before we go, Nancy has.
Oh, wait, hold on. Tamara, I don't know if I was disrespectful and said, the useless information. That's not what I meant. I meant you give fun facts as far as like these little silly complaints about somebody calling about a squirrel that is looking in her window and those types of things. So, Tamara, do you have another story or no?
No, she's busy.
She doesn't, okay.
All right. So before Nancy concludes, I just want to underscore again what I said at the beginning. You know, this is hard work, obviously, but we're in it together. And it really has been and continues to be a privilege to work for you, which is what I do. So thank you for allowing me to do that.
Isn't he the best? We appreciate you, Mike. Thank you. Okay, so just to wrap up my part as the membership chair, again, thank you everyone for coming out. And if you guys appreciate your ability to come and talk one-on-one and have access to really important people who are making key decisions on your behalf in our community, please support SOHA. We bring you these opportunities. So I have more of the membership flyers on the table, and members, please bring guests. Thank you.
Okay, does everyone have the red law?